J'ouvre maintenant la séance. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 3 du Comité permanent des comptes publics de la Chambre des communes. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room. I don't believe any are attending remotely, but they're certainly welcome to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to ask all in-person participants to read the guidelines written on the updated cards on the table. These are the measures to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, especially our interpreters. And you'll note also a QR code on the card which links to a short awareness video. Just to remind you, we've all had I know a hardworking summers in our constituents. So just to remind you again the procedures we go through here. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. All comments should be addressed to the chair as they are in the chamber. Alors aujourd'hui, le comité entreprend l'examen des questions concernant les travaux du comité.
Today we're going to be dealing with committee business.
Kind of informally go around rounds. I'm curious to hear priorities from members. Just a couple of key dates that are coming up. The Auditor General is expected to table her autumn reports probably sometime in October. That notice has not been sent to the Speaker yet, but that's probably 5 to 6 meetings before those additional investigations are tabled. The public accounts for 2025 will come out again probably in October or November. As a Public Accounts Committee, that's an automatic that we do look at those public accounts. The question up for debate is how many meetings, and so we do have. You're all familiar with the calendar. There's no meeting on Tuesday, September 30th. So. I'm really here to try to listen and try to kind of find out if there's a divide. I'm proposing we try to settle on a couple of reports or studies just to get us going, and then we reconsider when the auditor delivers her next batch of investigations, how we proceed for the remainder of the year and probably early into the new year. So. What I'm going to do, and I don't have the speaking order. I'm going to begin with Ms. Kusi, and then I'll go to someone on the government bench. But I do want to hear from everyone, so everyone will get a turn. The first round will be for 6 minutes from all three parties, as it is in a regular round. Then I'll go as if we're in a second round, 5 minutes for the official opposition, 5 minutes for the government, 2 minutes 30 secondes pour le bloc. I am going to be generous with time here. If
2.5 minutes for the block.
To say, I'll come back to you around. But this is just meant to give everyone an opportunity to speak. Does that sound?
I thought we were just going to have a general discussion.
Well, we are, but I want to hear from every member. And to me, this is the kind of it's just going to go back and forth like a ping pong ball. So. So I'm open to alternatives. I just thought that was a way to make sure I hear from everyone and to wrap things up. And as I know, there are some members who have a couple things they want to say. Certainly from one side, I indicated that if someone feels they've not had an opportunity, I'd come back to them as well. So it's just a way for me to kind of regulate it and get things going. So without further ado, Ms. Kusi, you have the floor on your priorities for this session.
Thank you, Chair. And certainly we want to start this conciliatory. We want to move forward in a collaborative fashion, which I know this government has set out to do, as the Prime Minister has given you the mandate to do. Chair, I'm so sorry you couldn't be there to draw attention to your absence, but the conference in Regina was just absolutely outstanding in terms of the camaraderie and also the lessons, I think, that we learned in terms of best practices from across the country, something really outstanding. So we definitely, I think, as a committee, came out of the conference with a renewed sense of collaboration and wanting to do what is in the interest of the Canadian people. Now, obviously, given that we're all different political parties, all of us will approach this with a different lens in terms of our values, our principles, the positions that we come from, and what we think is most valuable for the average Canadian citizen, which of course we hope to serve through this committee. But you have asked for our preferences in terms of studies going forward. As the Auditor General has said herself, and even said last night at dinner, there is no shortage of topics to choose from. The reports run the gamut, and every single report, as we learned in Regina, is something of significant consideration to her and her team when she decides to do it, and when she decides, her and her team decide to execute it. So both in the decision and in the completion of the report, these are not picked without due consideration. So with that, Mr. Chair, we are very interested in Report 3, which was just released in June, current and future use of office space, with a projected deficit of probably $84 billion, even though it currently sits at $61.9 billion. This government, this country needs revenue right now. And in the report, it was determined that there was going to be savings of $3.9 billion over 10 years, and that's really a drop in the bucket in terms of what we need. Some of the findings which stand out to me, or I should say one finding in particular, Mr. Chair, is that the revenues of sold assets aren't even currently documented, and to me that's astounding. That we're not even keeping track of what we are disposing of from a balance book perspective. I think this pairs very nicely with the housing initiative of the government, and I think that there is a lot to learn, both in terms of cost savings, efficient use of assets, and also as I said, hand in hand with the housing strategy of the government. So this would be our first one. Our second one that we're interested in, Mr. Chair, is the 2024 report number 5 of McKinsey, and the broader study, of course, of the professional services, specifically is what I'm pointing to, the study on professional services. Again, we have seen trouble with finding value for money time and time again. Both the Parliamentary Budget Officer and the Auditor General, I should say not both, all three of them, and the Procurement Ombud has stated over and over again that there is a lack of oversight, there is a lack of following through in terms of the rules, the regulations, their application, and the value for money. Also a theme at the time when this report was undertaken, Mr. Chair, were frankly the actors involved. This, of course, was under the previous Trudeau administration, but there was concern about the implication of McKinsey, the key players, Dominic Barton, and their influence on the government all throughout all ministries, all departments. And I think given the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, and his past positions, in addition to the conflicts of interest which have been reported, we must always keep our guard up as to these things as well. So that would be the second one. And the third one, Mr. Chair, I'm sure will come as no surprise, but it is GC strategies. The AG report shows more of the same. The Liberal government still needs to tighten up in terms of their procurement, where we learned from the Auditor General that in her samples, 21% of the samples lack security clearances. In 33% of contracts examined, federal organizations could not show the contract resources, had the experience, qualifications needed to complete the work. In 58% of the non-competitive contracts examined, federal organization failed to assess whether there would be benefits to calling for bids. Only 54% of contracts examined were situations where the federal departments could prove that their deliverables were even received, Mr. Chair. So we have a long way to go. And the final piece in regards to This report is, Mr. Chair, we never determined who chose GC Strategies. We never got to the bottom of that, Mr. Chair. So with that, I'll lay out our choices again. Number 3, Report 3, current and future use of office space, professional services, highlighting McKinsey. And number 3, Report number 4 from just this June 2025, GC Strategies. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kuzi. Turning now to the government side, Ms. Tessa Dirksen, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I don't think I'm going to take my full 6 minutes. So I do want to start by just talking a little bit about the trip I had to Regina, Saskatchewan with some of my colleagues to the CCPAC conference. That was September 7th to 9th in lovely Regina, Saskatchewan. I'd not been there before, so it was really nice to see the city. Hosted by the president, who was Saskatchewan MLA, Trent Witherspoon. We had a really great welcome and a good introduction to the city. And I was joined by my colleagues, Ms. Kuzi, Mr. Stevenson, and our analyst, Mr. Thekadath, and our clerk, Ms. Janot, along with the Auditor General, of course, and her staff. And we had a great time. I was especially impressed by the provincial PACs that updated us on their work and the panels that spoke about the best practices that made their committees highly functional. And I learned more about this committee's function as well, its ideal function and its purpose. Having had just been through one committee meeting so far, it's a little bit of baptism by fire. So it was nice to have this orientation with other PACs from across the country. And I did get a sense of some general themes. I understand that this committee and all PACs, us in particular, have been asked by Parliament to provide financial oversight of the government through the Auditor General's reports and the government's financial statements. That's obvious. And that we're not meant to critique policy. This might be a nuance that's lost on some folks, but I've come to understand it quite critically, that we're tasked with determining if implementation of policies has been properly executed, and we're to determine the effectiveness of public programs. So to sum it up in a phrase that Ms. Kuzi used, we have to find value for money, bang for our buck, bang for the taxpayer buck. And another recurring theme of the sessions was the inherent and necessary nonpartisan nature of public accounts committees. I know it's easier said than done sometimes, but this was really impressed upon us by one panel in particular that was actually led by a former chair of this committee, former MP Kevin Sorensen, and he discussed his time actually chairing this committee, and I got to chat with him afterwards, and we had a good discussion about the purpose and work that this committee is tasked to do by Parliament. I understand that there is a backlog of reports that we need to review, and I'd really like to get some work done, and I'm sure everyone around this table would agree with that. So overall, it was a very good introduction to the world of public accounts for me as a new MP and a new committee member, and I'd encourage anyone else to attend next year. It's towards the end of August in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And as far as reports that I would take a special interest in, I would take a special interest in the environmental reports. I know that it's been quite some time, I believe, that this committee has looked at any environmental reports. And as I understand, the Environment Committee has not been looking at them. So I think it might be an opportunity for us to review something that we haven't looked at in a long time. And that's all for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that was a great summary, I think, for everyone as to the role of public accounts and that came out of the conference in Regina. I'll turn now à notre collègue du Bloc québécois. Vous avez la parole pour...
You have the floor for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very happy to see the members of this committee under these circumstances. And given my role, I'm going to start by tabling the motions that I sent back in on June 16th. So the first one, pursuant to Standing Order 108 of the House of Commons, the committee undertake a study of the federal government's financial commitments related to the 2026 FIFA World Cup as they appear in the public accounts of Canada, that this study examine the budgeted, committed, and actual expenditures by federal departments and agencies in connection with hosting the World Cup. infrastructure investments, including temporary or permanent developments in host cities, such as stadiums, transportation networks, and hospitality facilities. C, costs related to event security, including coordination among the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, provincial and municipal police forces, and private security providers. D, federal financial contributions to provinces and municipalities, including the term and conditions of transfer agreements. E, compliance of expenditures with federal policies on financial management, procurement, and transparency. F, the anticipated economic benefits for Canada and the accountability mechanisms in place for such expenditures. And G, agreements with FIFA and their legal and financial implications for the federal government. And finally, that the committee draft a report and, pursuant to Standing Order 109, request the government table a comprehensive response to the report. In my opinion, Mr. Chair, these are responses that the government can provide quickly. I think that this is going to be a financial money pit. Do we have a way of preventing this through the commitments that have already been made by this government? That's the intention behind my motion. Do you want to deal with this motion now, or should I read the second motion? Thank you. The second motion is on another subject that is tied into Aboriginal affairs. And the challenge that I see here is that how is it that certain have some privileges given by the Act, whereas others do not. So I think that this motion is important, and the purpose of this motion is so I want there to be some clarity on this issue, and that's why last June 16th I tabled this motion that, pursuant to Standing Order 108.3G of the House of Commons, the committee recommend that the Auditor of General Canada conduct a performance audit of the federal additions to reserve ATR process as administered by the Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada, in English known as CERNAC, in order to assess A, the effectiveness and efficiency of ATR application processing, B, the average processing times at each stage of the process, as well as the causes of persistent delays, C, the transparency, predictability, and clarity of the assessment criteria applicable to First Nations, D, the coordination among CERNAC, Indigenous Services Canada, provinces, municipalities, and effective First Nations. E, compliant with the commitments outlined in the policy on addition to reserve and designated lands. And F, the outcomes achieved in terms of self-determination, community development, and equitable access to public services following the addition of land to a reserve, and that this audit contribute to the responsible, transparent, and effective management of public funds consistent with the Government of Canada's commitments to First Nations and in support of the reconciliation process. So this is an important issue. Canadians, Quebecers, the First Nations require clarification. I go back to Point 3, which talks about clarification of the Act. As for the other elements in the motion, first of all, I would be prepared to include environmental reports. I think this would be quite pertinent if we could include committee reports, and the interest of the Bloc Québécois in 16, the contract of professional service contracts for and the benefits, technological reports, and number 22, and the summer students program. Also, I agree with the Conservative proposal that we look at the various studies that were submitted by the Auditor General last spring. I think that there is something of interest in those reports. We could perhaps put some order to this. I think professional services, that is an important one. and the registration for the Indian Act, that's a huge issue. Will Canada reach its 2% target or 6% target for NATO? All joking aside, we need to really do a lot of work on this issue, and it has to be a priority. And this would have, and what's of interest to people in my riding is the whole issue of connectivity. That is of interest to me. So for the time being, this is how I see things. And we'll all have to make some compromises, but if I had to make a choice, I think the priority would be that particular study. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to take a few minutes to deal with your two motions. You're asking the Auditor General to undertake a study. It's up to the committee to decide whether it wants to support this motion and send it to the OAG. That's something that we could discuss here in the upcoming meetings. Your first motion, that's more difficult because usually, in order to undertake a study, it has to be tied in with something that Mrs. Hogan is doing. We didn't find anything that shows this is the case. When we undertake studies here at Public Accounts, whether it be reports for 2024 or 2025, we give the members of the political parties an opportunity to ask that the officials responsible for specific programs, that they come here to answer any questions we may have. There's no report that results. It's an exchange, and it gives an opportunity to members. That gives members an opportunity to ask questions. A few years ago, we asked members of the Bank of Canada to come and discuss. That would be my suggestion for this motion, because otherwise, I think it would be outside our mandate. And the departmental responses that we get can be used by other committees for their studies. They can bring them up in the House of Commons, but here at the committee, that's not something that we do. Thank you for speaking to me in French. It's much appreciated. I do understand what you're saying, but if I may, I'd like to ask a question. Would it perhaps be the time here at the committee to ask that we do this type of thing, that we ask the Auditor General to undertake certain studies? Because we all have concerns. And I'd like to say hello to the MP House Father who talked about issues as well. Can we make such a proposal to the Auditor General and then maybe get a report from the Auditor General and look at it then? We could, as a committee, ask the Auditor General to do anything, but it's not clear that she will agree to do so. So that would be a question for a committee. Should we send this motion to the Office of the Auditor General. And in addition, one question for this committee, and I can't really answer, I would suggest you should perhaps first talk to committee members outside the committee room, and maybe you'll get the support of committee members. We want to ask the Auditor General to do something when it's a real priority. Maybe we'll find this is acceptable, but that's just a little question that I have. So what you're asking me to do is to come up with a new type of wording that would invite the Auditor General to undertake a study with the elements contained in my motion, and that I should talk to the committee's members. Is that what you're getting at? Yes. Also, you could also think about inviting departmental officials to come to ask questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lemire. We met just last evening, and I gave some advice to the chair. Yes, from time to time, we do use the power of the committee to suggest a study to the Auditor General. But there's very little chance of success, I would say, if the motion were more specific, or if you could tighten up the wording, perhaps that would work. Sometimes the Auditor General does studies on policies, but those take anywhere from 12 to 18 months. If it's a specific program, a program that comes under the purview of the OIG, well, then that's easier to conduct a study at that time. The risk management and all that, these are all things that would be possible. So I think the greater precision is necessary. So I thought that the wording was clear, but I do understand what you're saying, Mr. Chair. If it's the will of the committee, I'm sure that if we don't deal with it now, it'll become an absolute priority within 2 years. Where are we now with it? I will go back and do my homework. I'm going to look at the validity of the motion. I will contact the committee members and see how they feel. Thank you very much. And you will have another chance to speak. Mr. Deltel, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, colleagues. It's a pleasure to see you here once again and to talk about public finances. So this is essential work, and we can, when we start a session such as the one today, we want to all cooperate. But there is something that probably all concerns us as parliamentarians, as members of independent groups and opposition parties. In our riding offices, we have all had to deal with dozens or hundreds of calls from taxpayers with respect to the Canadian Revenue Agency. I think a report's coming out on the 7th of October, but we have to admit that this is an issue that has an impact on all regions of Canada, coast to coast. We also know that because of the tax measures that have been presented, we are aware that if we don't get a high caliber service, it's the taxpayers who are going to be paying for that. Investigations have been taken, have been 80% of the people who call the CRA don't get any answer. So we're talking about 95%. So I understand that it's only 5% of the people who can actually reach somebody by telephone at the CRA. This is a public service. We're entitled to this service, and Canadians pay for this service. We have cases that were reported in the, I think it was in La Presse newspaper, that even the CRA was unable to provide specific information for citizens who wanted to invest in a TFSA. And so if they're not able to give a proper answer on the amount of money that somebody could put into a TFSA, that's a very, their very savings are jeopardized. So we also saw cases, and you'll see the number of errors that were reported in the medias. People in the Journal de Montréal, he had paid interest for an amount that he had paid to the CRA. So when you get a notification from CRA, it says you have to pay immediately or else. And you wonder, well, why should I pay interest on an amount that I've already paid for? So they were able to show that it's the CRA is the one that made the mistake. And most taxpayers are honest, but people who are working don't expect that the Canadian government look at them as if they're thieves. And Mr. Desrame, he received payments for, this was all that to which he wasn't entitled. The common point in all of this is that these people were all mistreated by the CRA. And in this case, it was a chap who was 78 years old who was being affected by this. Our seniors who have built Canada, who have built the wealth we have today, the least we can do is to ensure that they're treated in a dignified manner. And they must be not looked at as if they're trying to steal. These people who were born in the 30s, 40s, they didn't have access to computers. So we have to respect them when they want to have somebody to talk to at the end of the line. Of younger people, well, they do this intuitively. They work with computers, but you have to understand the situation of our elders. So I think that the CRA has to be accountable. I'm anxious to see what the Auditor General has to say in the report. And regardless of what party we represent, and regardless of what religion we come in, as parliamentarians, we have all had calls over the last few months by people who want to have access to the agency. And as a parliamentarian, I think this is something that we should work together on.
Merci beaucoup, M. Deltel.
Thank you, Mr. Deltel.
Membre du gouvernement, excuse-moi, j'ai pas encore une. Mr. Housefather, I got you. Sorry, this is not meant to. I actually thought this was the fairest way to do it. It just gives members a chance to express themselves, and if you're prepared to defer to the chair, just say so as well. But I suspect you'll have a few ideas yourself, Mr. Housefather.
To the chair, but I will not take 5 minutes that I promised, and it's a pleasure to be here with everybody. C'est un grand plaisir de travailler avec des collègues, avec Sébastien.
It's a pleasure to be here and to see our members from the Conservative Party, and you have too, of course, Mr. Chair.
I would like to suggest the study of the F-35s. Having worked on that with Ms. Kuzi at the OGO committee before, I do believe the F-35s are a very pressing issue in terms of decisions we're going to make in terms of a very important relationship with the United States and relationship in terms of the need to have fighter jets. So for me, that would be the one item that I would suggest looking at if we could. L'autre chose, c'est que j'appuie entièrement le...
The other thing is I fully support the motion with respect to FIFA, Mr. Chair. You're saying that the motion is not admissible because the tradition is that we only study things that the Auditor General has already looked at.
To rewrite it so that it would be then conforming, and I would totally support that. But that's all I have to say. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And I am sensing, Mr. Sébastien, qu'il vous avez de l'appui. Alors, so we'll keep working on this. The official opposition. Exactly. Mr. Kirk, we'd like to go for a couple minutes here as well, for 5 minutes.
Pleased to be on the. Is this live or?
Yes, it's okay.
Sorry. Thank you. Glad to be here, and I am honored to represent the taxpayer at this committee. I'm going to go through some reports and touch on some things and then talk about the two that I think we should focus on the most. So first and foremost, report number 3, current and future use of federal office space. I found some interesting quotes in there. First, the CMHC is reporting of the number of housing units built lack clarity. In addition, the initiative did not maximize access to affordable housing for those with the greatest need. The Auditor General confirmed what Canadians already know, that the government is failing on housing. Nearly half of the units promised through CMHC programs won't be ready on time. The so-called affordable housing doesn't even target the lowest income families who are struggling, and that is a big concern. So I would put forth that we look at report number 3 specifically. The second one I'd like to touch on, and I'll go through them. Report number 4, professional service contracts with GC Strategies. Specifically here, the value for money did not meet the Auditor General's standards. Security requirements were not enforced. The study states that the federal organizations were not able to show that all contract resources had the appropriate security clearance prior to the contract being given. In 46% of these contracts examined, almost half, the study found that federal organizations had little to no evidence to support that deliverables were received. Despite this, the federal government officials consistently authorized payments. So we have to look at report number 4, and we have to tackle 3 things: value for dollar, security issue, payment without proof of work was completed. I would like to put forth that we take a closer look at report number 4. Those will be my 2 main suggestions. Some other interesting things I found in the other reports was a report on COVID-19 pandemic CEBA, Canadian Emergency Business Account. First, we have a $8.5 million in remaining loans to collect, and in this report, there is clearly no plan on how they are collecting on these defaulted loans, and collecting on loans could last till 2032. Over half of these ineligible loans have still not been paid off, and that's a very, very big concern to me, and I think the Canadian taxpayer. As a result, now we have $3.5 billion in COVID-19 business loans that were given to ineligible recipients. Very concerning. In this report, it's clear that the government likes to move fast with no control or no plan. On report number 7, combating cybercrime, I found in this report that the CRTC received about 75,000 reports of cybercrime-linked incidences and only investigated 6. This is extremely concerning because the government is failing to protect Canadians. And something that hits home to me is I have an 84-year-old father, and this is exactly what targets, these crimes target seniors, and they could be the most affected. So that I found very, very concerning. Next, report number 8, Zero Emissions Vehicle Infrastructure Program. Quote, in a 2024 report done by Dunsky Energy and Climate Advisors, identified the need for approximately 240,000 public charging ports by 2023. The current ZVIP target is to support 78,500 public and private chargers by 2029. That's only 33% of what we would need to support the government's EV mandate. Report 2, I'd like to touch on delivering Canada's future fighter jet capability study. This audit shows that we're more than 3 years behind on the infrastructure, and 6 years later, we still have a shortage of pilots. Simply put, at the end of the day, we will have planes with no pilots and no runways. Report number 11, programs to assist seniors. StatsCan says that the population of seniors could almost double over the next 2 decades. The audit found that the government programs were out of touch on the wants and needs of seniors. They also couldn't determine if the programs were effective, nor could they show how many seniors had benefited. So I will spend my time on this committee to, again, like I said in my opening statements, represent the taxpayer, and that's my job. And to reiterate, I'd like to focus on report number 3 and report number 4. And thank you for my time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Yip, it looks like you're preparing to take a round. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please. Great.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to see all the new members on this committee, and I know that Ms. Kuzi and Ms. Tesser Dirksen attended the conference on public accounts, and I think it's a great introduction, especially for what this committee is supposed to be about: nonpartisan, value for the taxpayer, and really looking at the Auditor General's report to make a difference. There are so many reports that we haven't seen from the Auditor General, not just the ones that are listed here. And I just want to make a point of saying that I wish we could have reviewed more of those reports in the past, but it would be good if, in the spirit of what was stressed in the Public Accounts Conference of being nonpartisan and collaborative, that if every party could choose one report, then it would be fair. 3 reports, 3 parties here, and I think we would be able to cover a number of interests and so forth. So I also note that, and I know, Mr. Chair, you will know what I'm saying, that we have a number of draft reports dating from 2022 that need to be also incorporated. And Mr. Lemire, I'm sure that we can have a chance to discuss your motion a little bit more, maybe offline. And I do think that the reports that I would like to look at is some of the reports from the Environment Commissioner. There are 4 reports here, and I think all of them would be good to look at. In particular, lessons learned from Canada's record on sustainable development. That's number 4 from the Commissioner. It looks at 3 decades to foster sustainable development. And I think that given where we are going with the environment, my concern for future generations like my children, even thinking about the wildfires. I was in Edmonton last week, and I was surprised at how hazy it was. I mean, even in, Toronto, we've had days where it's been hazy. So I think it's important to see what the lessons are that have been learned and to apply it to the future. So I would recommend that one, and as well as the current and future use of federal office space. That's report number 3 from the Auditor General, because housing is, of course, a big concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yip. Mr. Stevenson?
Thank you. I'll be pretty brief. I too did make the trip to Regina, and it was very informative as to some of the procedures in other jurisdictions and how hopefully we can cooperate. It sounds like we're starting to have a little bit of consensus already with a couple of them with regards to one of them being the reporting on the housing. That would be one of the issues that we would look at. Another one that I would want to support is also the professional services contracts that we want to look at. One that's got a little more, and then be the third one for me that's got a little more priority that my colleague here, Mr. Carrick, mentioned about the CEBA loans. As somebody that was in public practice during the process, I did find that there's a lot of issues of how it proceeded, and I'd be interested to see how the follow-up was determined. And I think there's a lot of issues that we need to look at in regards to how it's going to be collected, but also those people that had forgiveness, whether or not it was actually reported as income, tying it back to CRA. So not just the program itself and giving the money, but in actually the taxing the actual part of the portions that were forgiven both in the first part and in the second phase. So that would be interesting to see, because I didn't read any details that went and looked at any of that part of it. So, and the other part of that kind of ties into it is the modernization part of it for implementation, in that, as Mr. Detal had discussed about modernizing CRA, making it difficult and kind of becoming somewhat ageist or discriminatory towards those that are technically challenged, and how they're going to go forward in dealing with CRA, and that's going to be a problem. So in regards to how they're actually going to show that. So those are kind of the reports that I've looked at that would be of interest to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevenson. Mr. Osborne, would you like to share your thoughts with us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm certainly looking forward to working with all of you around the table. It does seem like we're building some consensus, so I'm quite excited for the consensus at Public Accounts. I was on the agenda for Regina, and I missed that. As we all know around the table, this is the most certainty we have in our positions as members of Parliament, is the uncertainty of our schedule sometimes, and something came up. So I would have liked to have gotten there as a new member of Public Accounts at the federal level. I see that we are reaching some level of consensus. I think as well on, from my perspective, looking at Canada's record on sustainable development is important, and I do agree if we can have one report from each of the parties represented here, and within our own caucuses perhaps reach a consensus on what that report is. I would see that as being fair and equal in terms of the consensus that we are trying to build. I will say for MP Lemire, I'm determined to learn French, so I can speak to you in your language as well as you listening to me in English. I am taking French lessons, so I will get there, and maybe I will get some lessons on the side from yourself to help get me there. In terms of your motion, I think we can work together and find some sort of solution in bringing your motion forward. So look forward to discussions with you on that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very, very much. Are there any other comments anyone would like to make? I'm not. So I agree. I'm sensing some broad agreements. I'm not going to attempt to repeat it now in case I get it wrong, but there's a few of us up here who are taking notes, and we'll report back to you on that. I just want a couple other housekeeping points, and then I'm going to move us into camera because we have some departmental requests that we need to consider, as well as requests for some of the committee time. I will just highlight in public that the Auditor General would like to come and brief us at some point in the coming weeks on her office's role. It's a good oversight for new members, of which there are many here. That happens in camera. I just looking for a signal. I suspect we'd be interested in this. I'm saying yes, 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 and I know the OAG team is watching this, so they'll see that as an acceptance, and we'll begin to find some time. So if that, unless there's any other points, I'm going to suspend the meeting. We'll come back in camera and we'll pick things up. As-tu quelque chose à ajouter?
Do you want to add anything? I'd just like to support the suggestion made by Mr. Deltel with respect to the services that were received by our seniors. That's a situation that I have been seeing in my writing. Seniors are having problems, and I think that would be good to look at. Thank you.
All right, we are suspended. We'll come back as quickly as possible as we can in camera. Thank you. This meeting is suspended.